Joining me on the Boardwalk Honda hotline now, Emily Kaplan, writes about the NHL for ESPN, also hosts their NHL podcast on ESPN Pod Center. Emily, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing well. So, we got the NHL trade deadline just a couple days away, and before we get to the NHL as a whole, the Flyers made a deal, and a necessary deal, right in our backyard. Peter Mrazek comes over, had a good debut last night, 19 of 20 games. What is the thing that you want to let Flyer fans know about Peter Mrazek? Because, he's a guy, he's been in Detroit his whole career, and a lot of people in this area, they either don't pay attention to Detroit or they still are mad at Detroit because of the Stanley Cup Finals loss back in the 90s.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One thing about Peter Mrazek is, for a long time, Detroit viewed him as the key to their future. He was going to be their starter. That kind of derailed in the last season and a half. He had been on the market for a while just because I think they knew they weren't going to re-sign him. They couldn't quite get what they wanted. And therefore, when he finally did go to the Flyers, he went for a steal. It really wasn't a terrible deal for them. They only gave up a conditional, I believe it's third rounder, if not a fourth. And that's good because, look, that's obviously their biggest need right now. And when you look at the Flyers, they're inexplicably contending right now. They're probably going to make the playoffs, which seems crazy because of their start. Goaltending is the biggest area of concern, and we'll see if they can add anyone else.
You look at the Flyers team, you mentioned the start that they had. That December, a lot of people were saying, maybe they should fire the head coach. Maybe they thought the head coach was the problem, and the GM, Ron Hextall, said, listen, let's be patient, let's let this team turn around. And this team didn't just turn around. They're in a position where they're tied now with the Penguins in points in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. They had such a long losing streak and then the long winning streak. They were like the streakiest team in the league. I think a lot of times patience is a virtue. In professional sports, we don't get that. This is actually the first year in the NHL since Original Six expansion that we've gone this late in the season without a coaching change, which is kind of crazy. I think the Flyers were an early candidate for that, and you see sometimes, okay, if you just give them some time, they can work their way out of the funk.
One of the guys who has played very well this year, and it was a bit interesting what they did with him, was Claude Giroux. Giroux having arguably his best year in about 3-4 years, but the move was Hextall moving him to the wing. Now he plays next to Sean Couturier, and while Couturier is having a great year, one could argue that's a partly byproduct of the fact that he's got Giroux next to him, and Giroux looks like a much fresher player on the wing than at center.
No doubt about it, and I actually think that's one of the more underrated stories in the league this year. I mean, Claude Giroux had a terrible year last year, the career worst year, and to rebound the way he did in a position switch is pretty incredible, and he's really revived his career in a big way. So, yeah, you're absolutely right that he's, benefiting the players around him. Sean Couturier is having a fantastic season, and everyone should just be celebrating, the fact that, hey, his career's not dead.
What is the potential for this Flyers team? Because right now, they could actually work their way up to the top of the Metropolitan Division, which would give them a favorable matchup in the postseason. We know a lot of times it's the goaltending that carry you in the playoffs. So can Mrazek or Elliott, or can this team make a deep playoff run?
Yeah, I think this is a team that might go and, sink or swim based off of what they get from the goaltending. I think if Mrazek's playing with a chip on his shoulder, which he probably is, and he's playing to his fullest capacity, I feel really good about it. What I would say is I'm really curious to see what they do Monday before the trade deadline. And a lot of times the way owners and general managers look at the trade deadline is what is the team, do they deserve us to be buyers or sellers, right? Like, what did they earn? And there's no question about it that the way these guys have played, I think they earned to get a little help, right? They could probably benefit from, a little scoring help or some depth. So if they are active on the trade deadline, I think that there's a really good chance they could surprise a lot of people.
It's interesting because Ron Hextall has said in the past, he's talked about patience, about letting the team mature and get better. And then last year, a year where they missed the postseason, and overall they just didn't play up to expectations or at all. But they made a trade for Phil Pula. So that was a team last year that didn't make the playoffs, and they made a move. What kind of move do you think the Flyers could make, considering that you have a guy in Ron Hextall who is known for talking about being patient, and the Flyers aren't run the way they used to with Ed Snyder and the GMs before?
Yeah, that's definitely correct when you put it like that. I've heard that they could be one of the sneaky teams that's in on a player like Evander Kane, which is wild. They could probably surprise and get a winger rental. There's a lot of winger rentals there. I think a depth defenseman definitely wouldn't hurt them. And the fact that they've got a goalie is great because they've already checked that off their list.
Looking over at the Eastern Conference as a whole, you look at the Metropolitan, the Penguins at 74 points, the Capitals at 75 points. To me, you look at the Penguins on paper and the Capitals on paper, and you think, oh, they should be two of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. But yet instead, the two best teams in the Eastern Conference are the Lightning and the Bruins. So what is going on with the Penguins and the Capitals this year?
I think they're both having terrific seasons. I wouldn't put that against them. I think that the Lightning are a team that's just out of everyone's league right now. Just the depth they have, the scoring they're getting, they're all-world goaltending by Vasilevsky. The Bruins are a surprise this year. They're kind of doing this weird balancing act where they're rebuilding at the same time that they're contending, and they're doing it in a really impressive way. But look, the Washington Capitals are a team that we all expect to take a drop-off this year. Even their own general manager, Brian McClellan, said that he thought their window was closing. He felt like their Stanley Cup window had closed and they didn't capitalize on it. As for the Penguins, I mean, they've put so many miles on the last two seasons with the Stanley Cup runs they had. You saw that reflect on the way they started the season, which was very unimpressive. They don't have great depth at center. They had to give up a lot last offseason. And the fact that they're peaking right now, I think they're trending up, and they're the team that's scaring everyone. Like, people around the league are saying this is going to be a three-peat now.
Sticking with the Capitals for a moment, what is the future for Alex Ovechkin? Because this is a guy who has had an amazing career statistically, but he hasn't had a lot of playoff success in Washington, whereas his counterpart, Sidney Crosby, has won all those cups in Pittsburgh. What is the long-term future of Ovechkin? Because in many ways, it's rare to see a guy with his success, but lack of team success, staying with one team this long.
You're right. It definitely is. I think he is a career Capital. I can't imagine him in any other uniform. His contract runs to the 20 to 21 season. He is currently 32 years old. I think that, is a natural stopping point for him, or maybe he signs a little extension there before going back to his home of Russia. But I think this is a guy who gave it his all, is an incredibly prolific player, but might always be remembered as the best player that never won a Stanley Cup.
Looking at the rest of the Eastern Conference, are the Lightning the prohibitive favorite, or is there another team, whether it's the Bruins or the Maple Leafs, is there a team in the Eastern Conference, or maybe even Pittsburgh, with the big three super talents they have? Is it something where who is the team outside of the Lightning that you look at and say it would not surprise you if they made a run to the Cup?
I think it's Pittsburgh, and it's solely for the fact that they have all the pieces there, and they're just peaking at the right time. Like, you don't want to be the team that wins all the games for the All-Star break and then comes out as a dud for the second half of the season. The Penguins, rather, are the total complete opposite of that, where they kind of slog their way through the beginning of the season, and the way they're trending now is trending towards a long playoff run.
We're talking with Emily Kaplan, writes about the NHL for ESPN. Emily, looking at the Western Conference, I think everyone agrees that the Vegas Knights are not just the surprise team of the season, but they're just amazing to watch as well. I mean, they got so much speed, they got so much talent on the ice. But how did they do it? How did an expansion team get this good this fast?
You have to remember that they are set up better than any expansion team was in the past with the rules that they had, the types of players they were able to pick and who was exposed. I also think that a lot of other teams just overthought it and were trying to wheel and deal and make all these trades that benefited the Golden Knights when they should have just viewed it as, look, you're just losing one player. Don't overthink it. Just give it to them. That said, there's some intangibles going on. Everyone kind of talks about the Vegas flu maybe affecting road teams. You also have a team where every single person on the roster is playing with a chip on their shoulder. Every game is a revenge game for someone, and that can't be understated. And they're just a balanced team. They roll out four lines so evenly, three defensive pairings, and the goaltending has been terrific. It's not just Marc-Andre Fleury because he's been out for a while. They have Malcolm Subban come in and guys like Maxim Lagasse come in, and those things all combined are this perfect storm where they're just terrific.
You look at who is also in that Pacific Division. To me, the Ducks are kind of sneaky because I think that in many ways, the 31-20-11 record doesn't tell the whole story of how talented that team is. Are they a team that could upset the apple cart in the playoffs?
Yeah, they absolutely are. And I think why their record is so poor is that they had so many injuries early on. It was almost an embarrassing, list of the guys that were out, and the fact that they were able to withstand those injuries and now come back. I think everyone's waiting for them to kind of start clicking. It's been a little bit of a slog. I know their GM, Bob Murray, is a little frustrated. We're going to see him at the trade deadline and see if he gets them some reinforcements. But you're right, there's just so much talent on that roster. And the thing about them is they're built to win right now. Their core is aging. So it's this season, maybe next season, or bust.
The St. Louis Blues are a team that I think has a lot of talent as well, kind of like the Ducks. But again, their record doesn't tell the whole story of how good they can be. We saw in the past, teams that are the 8 seed or are the 7 seed make Stanley Cup runs. Are the Blues possibly that team in the Western Conference that could make that run from a wild card spot?
They are. They definitely are. And look, like you said, it doesn't tell the whole story. For the first half of the season, they were the best team in the West. They were incredible. It was the emergence of guys like Jaden Schwartz that was taking a little bit of the load off of Vladimir Tarasenko. It's the defense that's really great. Alex Pietrangelo is probably the most underrated defenseman in the league. So I think if they click and all the right things, and I hate, putting all of this on the trade deadline, but they're a team that everyone expects to be pretty active, and I really do think they could benefit from getting one of these rental wingers that's on the market. That could be a, top 6 scoring help.
Who right now is, you think, outside of, people always talk about Sidney Crosby as the best player in the NHL, but who in your mind are some other guys who are in the conversation? We know about the Ovechkins and some of the other guys, but I think sometimes because hockey is a sport that gets overlooked for the first half because of football season, tell the people out there, who are the best players in the NHL in your mind this year?
Yeah, well, it's difficult, but just if we're going off of talent, earlier in the year, I asked a bunch of players who's the best player in the league now and who's going to be the best player in the league 5 years from now. 5 years from now, uniformly, Connor McDavid got votes. But what's interesting to me is Connor McDavid even got votes from his peers about right now over Sidney Crosby. People think he's that good. He's, obviously going to be the face of the league for many years. It's just unfortunate that his Oilers just decided to implode this year. They've been a terrible team. I don't think enough is ever said about Patrice Bergeron in Boston. He is the most complete player in the game, offensively and defensively. What he's been able to sustain for so many years is incredible, and he's having a career year this year. And then obviously another candidate for the Hart Trophy or MVP would be Nikita Kucherov in Tampa Bay. They had the best line in hockey this year. It's Nikita Kucherov, Nemestikov, and Steven Stamkos, and all three of them, honestly, have just been terrific.
You can follow her on Twitter at Emily M. Kaplan. She writes about the NHL for ESPN, also hosts their hockey podcast on ESPN Pod Center. Emily, appreciate the time today, and it's pretty cool seeing how you evolved, because I remember used to listen to you and Albert Breer on that podcast, and now you moved over to ESPN covering hockey. So it's been a pretty interesting couple of years for you.
It definitely has. It's really just been an interesting year of just switching over to this new beat, but I'm loving it.
Emily, appreciate the time today.
All right, take care.